You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. I'm Niki Sims, joined with my favorite co-host, Matt Reynolds, my other favorite co-host, Gillian Ward. And we are talking this year about kind of getting started. It's the new year. We're trying to make some changes. And last week, we got to speak about how to get started with training with the new exercise program. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and check it out from last week. And today we get to talk about solving that problem of what do I do? How do I get started when I know I need to make some changes to my nutrition? So we have our head of nutrition, Gillian Ward, here to help us through that. She's helped both me and Matt with our nutrition and tons of our other clients, and she produces a lot of content. So she's our nutrition wizard.
Have you guys ever heard of the Feynman Technique? You heard of that before? You guys know what that is?
No.
So this guy who's a super famous, very smart, incredibly smart physicist, I think it was a Nobel Prize winner. He was a guy that said, and I think it was Einstein did this as well. Like, if you can't explain the thing to a third grader or fifth grader, then you don't really know it, right? And we live in a world full of like this kind of Dunning-Kruger syndrome, right? Where people they read an article and they're like, I know it all, I got it all. And it's like, they don't know what they don't know. To really get good at this is you've got to have the ability to make it simple. And it's tough to do, really hard to do in fitness and nutrition, really hard because it's so complicated and there's all these inputs coming in from all these other places. And so one of the things I love about Gillian is her ability to just make this stuff simple. Gillian's got incredible knowledge and background in the sciences. She knows it, but it doesn't resonate well. Like that's the thing is that we're not trying to talk to robots. We're talking to people. And I think one of the things that I've loved about what Gillian's done with our nutrition at Barbell Logic is she's able to talk to the person, the human, right? We're not perfect. Nobody wants to eat like a bodybuilder and eat chicken breast and broccoli all day. Like we go to grandma and grandpa's for Christmas and, or she makes lasagna. Like, what are you going to do? Say, can't eat lasagna? So she takes those things into account. So yeah, welcome to the show, Gillian.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So somebody's starting and they're like, I have no idea what to do. And they see all this
I know
stuff.
I don't like where I'm at and I want to be different immediately.
Right. How do I look great tomorrow? We know that's not going to happen, but
yeah.
Where do you start with somebody?
That's honestly the first step is they've acknowledged that they want to make a change. Because more often than not, it is so much less to do about knowing it and more to do with doing it. So, when I work with clients, I might know what it is they need to do, but I can't make them do it. And a lot of people with nutrition kind of know what it is they need to do, but they don't know the steps to get there, or they're thinking 10 steps out ahead as opposed to the next step. So the very first step is the acknowledgement that you need to make a change. So to make a change, when we make a change, to make a sustainable change, we need to take one step at a time. So a diet is not going to work because it'll look like, what are you doing right now? Let's say you decided you're going to read a diet book and follow that diet. That may be a total 180 from what you're currently doing. But to make a change, again, taking it one step at a time, the first thing we're going to do is examine what are we doing right now? Forget where you're going. You can't get to the next destination unless you know where you're starting from, right? If someone's like, hey, wind up at point B, and you don't know where your point A is. So the first step is taking an honest look at what point A is and realizing that not everything needs to change. So step one, in terms of addressing your nutrition for any goal, whether that goal is health related, aesthetics, weight, body fat loss, putting on muscle, is what am I doing right now? So first step is to tell the truth, and it's an honest self-assessment. And how do we do that? We lie to ourselves. Things don't always register. We think we're doing something, it's a little different. We think we drank 5 ounces of wine and it was a liter of wine. So one of the best—
That's a lot of wine. That's more than a bottle.
Don't need to call anybody out personally on the show, Gillian.
The easiest thing to do with nutrition is honestly to spend a few days up to a week's time of taking pictures of everything that you put in your mouth. And if you missed a picture of it, kind of write it down. Is taking a look. What am I eating? And part of that first step is trying not to change your behaviors based on knowing that you're doing that. Although most of you will see an improvement to your behavior just by taking the picture alone. So let's say you're passing the candy dish that's still left from Christmas and you're getting ready to grab 3 Hershey Kisses. And you're like, oh, if I eat those, I need to take a picture. You might end up passing them up. Or knowing you're taking pictures, maybe you're going to work through lunch. Maybe you're trying to put on body mass and you're going to work through lunch and not take that break to feed yourself. And you thought to yourself, you know what? My first step is to take pictures, and my picture is going to be missing lunch today. So that would be step 1.
So I'll tell you one thing that I do when I take pictures is that, you guys know this. I love to cook, and I love to, in spite of being a 270-pound powerlifter, I love to like have pretty plates, like look nice, presentation, right? Take pictures. And if I get a massive serving of something and I'm going to take a picture of it, I'm like, this is going to look bad. Or if I'm going to have like bread, like if I've got bread as a side dish and I'm like, you know what I'd really like to do is put about 2 tablespoons of butter on this thing. But if I take a picture of there's 2 tablespoons of butter on it, I'm going to get called out, right? So sometimes just taking the picture and even like thinking about things like the presentation of the food, you start to go like, I'm going to make sure this like not just looks good, looks pretty, looks attractive, but like also looks healthy. I can't have it like drizzled in oil.
Yep. And you'll notice even making your plate and taking the picture, most people do know a lot about nutrition. We kind of get confused because we hear all of these differing viewpoints that are in opposition. But if you look at your plate, you're going to see what's missing from that plate. So you put a plate together and your plate looks all white. You know, you've got 2 pieces of white bread and you've got turkey and you've got mayonnaise. You could take a look at that and realize without having sophisticated nutritional knowledge that you're probably missing some color. And maybe you could add some peppers and carrots to that plate. So it's super helpful. And it's a very easy way without getting into a higher level. We're not talking about weighing and measuring. So we're talking about the very, very first steps. And you'll get an idea of the quantity that you're consuming by taking a look at those pictures. You'll get an idea of the quality of the food you're consuming. And you're going to get to start to know your habits. So one of the issues that I have with a conventional diet is, let's say you're somebody that eats twice a day, but the diet tells you that, you know, you need to eat 8 times a day, or the opposite. Let's say you're a grazer and you eat throughout the day and you've decided you're going to do this intermittent fasting thing or 2 meals a day, which is very different. This will kind of allow you to start your own plan. And you may notice, I'm a grazer. I eat 3 times a day. And this will also allow you to start to see kind of cause and effect from eating. So to start to get to know those behaviors in yourself, like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you know, maybe you were crashing and you decided to have a big bowl of sugary cereal. It will allow you to identify patterns in your day, or maybe something like, you know, you're running around the afternoon running errands and taking the kids everywhere and you haven't planned, and every afternoon you go through a drive-through. So it's really going to tell you a lot of things with those pictures that often you're not being honest with yourself and you don't realize without doing it.
Well, you said something earlier that I really like too, is sometimes you realize that you don't have to change everything.
Exactly.
Which is reassuring. So like even just the act of doing visual food diaries, like you've been saying, makes you change some behaviors. It also helps me, or it helps to hear that not everything has to change, because then I'll be very honest with the visual food diary, because it's like, I want to be truthful with where I'm at, because I don't want you to think that I eat some way that I actually don't, and then start making changes that I'm going to feel a lot
Yeah, that's
more.
the worst. If you fake 3, you're like, I'm not going to show her these 3 things that I'm doing. And the first thing she changes is like, oh man, this is like a huge change, right? She's like,
Yeah.
You fake it and you're like, I'm eating 2,800 calories a day, but you're actually eating 3,800 calories a day. And then she's like, let's put you on 2,500 calories a day. Like that's God. Yeah. So it's like, I actually load extra stuff in there when I take visual food diaries. So I put like a whole stick of butter, or like, no. So then she's like, let's triage the stick of butter away. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool.
Cool. Got it. I can do that.
Yeah. So you said the first one is really understanding why, right? The goal. What's the goal? What are you doing? And we talked about this in the last episode with the fitness as well. And then 2 is just like understanding where you're at, and it's okay where you're at. Literally, like this is in the same way we talked about last week with fitness. It's not about comparing yourself to the Instagram model or the person that trains 2 hours a day, 7 days a week, or the person who eats like a bodybuilder all the time. Like that's not, it's just about understanding like this is where we're at and we want to get better for whatever better is, comes back to the goal. And so that visual food diary of taking those pictures really gives you an idea of exactly what you're eating. So once you get that, what then is the next step? You're like, okay, now I can see what I've done this for 7 days or whatever. Where do they go from there?
I think with taking an honest look at what it looks like in front of you and knowing what your goals are, this is an interesting part because it's almost like you set up your barriers next. So I call it understanding your non-negotiables. So if you are going to make changes and commit to making changes, there are some things that we don't want to let go of. So your non-negotiables are kind of like your security blanket. Imagine they're the things that you want to bring with you along the way that make it okay. So you may say to yourself, you know what? I could cut my bacon out of breakfast and maybe I don't need 3 tablespoons of mayonnaise on my sandwich at lunch and I don't have to go through the fast food, but that glass of wine at night is important to me. So it's starting to identify the couple of things that are really important to you. And they don't have to be foods or drinks. It could be behavior or an activity. It could be, it is important to me. My non-negotiable is that I have family night, that I eat dinner once a week at a restaurant with my wife and kids. Or Sunday morning, I'm going to make a pancake breakfast with my kids and I'm going to eat it because I'm going to show them healthy, positive behaviors related to food. So it's seeing the truth in front of you and kind of pulling out the things that, again, your security blanket, your non-negotiables, things that you're going to carry with you, and looking then from there at things that you can and are willing to change.
I like that. That's good. What are some of your non-negotiables, Niki?
So many. I like having a glass of wine or a cocktail if I go out. I like having dessert before bed, after dinner. I like having one meal at least to go out during the week and like where I order out or when I go out to eat. Otherwise, I'm pretty cool with eating at home.
That's good.
Yeah. What about you? What are yours?
I want a real dinner. Jillian knows I can eat, I can restrict or make sacrifices for breakfast and lunch. I still want real food, but I can eat pretty low calorie. I'm not obviously trying to add body mass. I'm trying to do the opposite. So I can restrict there, but I want a real dinner. I want to eat real dinner with my family. I don't want to be like, oh, you guys eat this and I can't eat what you're eating. Obviously, I want to have a whiskey or two and afterwards if the calories are there and I've done the right thing earlier in the day. I've kind of banked my calories. I want to be able to do that. So those are the big ones for me. Like same thing. I want to be able to eat out, but eating out, I want to be able to eat out, but I can make healthy choices when I eat out. It's fine. It's not about, I don't want to be able to go eat, talked about the all white plate. I don't need the all brown plate of fried everything. I don't need fried catfish and hush puppies and French fries. And like, that's gross to me. I wouldn't want to eat that anyway, but I do want to be able to go to a restaurant. And when you go to a restaurant, even if you get vegetables, it's going to be cooked in butter and, so I want to be able to do that every once in a while as well. But those are the big ones, I think, for me. Alcohol and dinner.
Cool.
So then what do you do, Jillian?
So we have our plan in front of us and we know the things that we're not willing to give up. It doesn't mean we're not willing to make changes to those things. So I want to be a little bit more clear. Non-negotiables, if you drink 6 drinks a night, you may not, if you want to be losing weight, you may not be able to carry that with you. So there's some amount of compromise. So from there, the next step is triage. What triage is identifying the place or places that you can make a change that are going to have the largest impact. What is getting in your way the most? So what is, if you're not achieving your results, is looking at, once you've done the self-assessment, are you eating too much? If that's what you discovered, and you're gaining weight and you want to be losing weight, and when you're looking at triage, what change can you make overall to reduce the calories? Like, what is the simplest, most obvious thing? But triage is also balanced with where could you make the biggest change and what are you willing to do? So you may examine a few different parts of your typical diet. So I think we should work through an example of this so that it makes sense. I'm going to triage.
Okay.
Who are we going to triage?
Me.
You gave this great example with, and I had made a note in my notes that said, what happens when the non-negotiables and the triage like bump up against each other? So look, we can use me because my biggest one is alcohol. So a non-negotiable for me is I want to be able to have a drink or two every day, like after dinner, after training, but it's easy for me to have 5 drinks. And so I think if you looked at my visual food diary and I was very honest, there would be days where you're like, oh, he had 5 drinks. And it's not like I'm hammering 5 drinks at once and I'm getting drunk. It's that I had a drink in the afternoon, maybe a pre-dinner drink with my wife, and then like we split a bottle of wine. Well, that's 4.5 drinks in a hurry. And you're like, and I'm a big guy and I never even feel it, but it's the caloric load is tremendous. So that would be a place for me where I'm like, non-negotiable alcohol, but they're like, bro, 4.5, 5 drinks, too much. So
Absolutely.
how do we address that?
And we also want to look at something like that, not just, so one meal doesn't tell a story, right? I mean, we could see a breakfast and you could have had biscuits and gravy for breakfast and you were trying to lose weight, but the rest of the day, you had broccoli. So a meal doesn't tell a story. A day doesn't tell a story. So we want to look at a day over a week. So let's say that you had a day and you had 5 or 6 drinks in a day, but the rest of the week you didn't have anything else. So we want to be looking at this all the time as the next step in the bigger picture. But you're correct. For triage, Matt, in your case with triage, it would be, because alcohol, it is not just the calories that come from alcohol. So alcohol is a big one with people. It's the decision making. So it's easier to grab, it's easier to munch and nosh while you're drinking. So it's, again, only part of it is the calories with alcohol.
Yeah, that's good. So it's funny, you talk a lot about consistency, and I've never thought about this with your triage method. You actually look at the thing that the person is consistently doing that might be an unhealthy behavior, or is something that's in maybe a better term is it's in the way of their goal. So it's not that, you had pizza and Krispy Kreme donuts on Friday night. It's like, you're eating pizza 4 times a week, or you got 4 or 5 drinks a day every day, not one time, right? Well, a lot of people I think a lot of people think that they're like, I cheated on Friday night. Like, hey, Friday night's not the problem. It's all the other days.
That's going to have the most profound impact on your goal. I'll give you an example of that. Somebody is overeating. They're consuming too many calories to be at a deficit, which is essential for fat loss. So triage is going to be to find a way to accomplish the caloric reduction. Whereas, so it makes it just kind of an obvious, simple step. Whereas if somebody didn't know how to go about that, they may say to themselves, well, maybe I'm not eating enough protein, which may be true. But what is getting in the way of the goal? So it's kind of simplifying it. And it sounds complex as we're talking about it. And I think people are going to say, I don't know if I'm going to know how to do that. I challenge you to do 5 days of taking pictures and it will be obvious.
Yeah. Take pictures of even like the drive-bys, the snacks, the liquid, and it becomes very apparent.
Like how often, I hear so often people with children that they eat their kids' leftovers or they eat stuff while they're prepping for the kids or off the kids' plate. I didn't want to throw this out. So we bring so many cultural ideas with us about food and so much of our history. And many of us grew up where we didn't throw out food. And I see a lot of the people that I work with as clients carry that over from childhood. So their kids finish something, instead of bagging up those pizza crusts and putting them in the fridge or maybe going outside and feeding them to the birds, they eat it off the kid's plate. And they don't even realize it, and it doesn't register that they're doing with it. That's why that exercise is so powerful in the beginning.
The dad tax.
The Halloween problem. My bigger issue there is the pre-dinner snack. It's the handful of mixed nuts, the 3 handfuls of mixed nuts while I'm cooking dinner. Because you're hungry, you smell the food, you're like, I'm so hungry. You go in the pantry to get the olive oil and you're like, ooh, macadamia nuts. And you're like, these are buttery and delicious.
Yeah, totally.
And then you go back, every time you go back to the pantry, you get another handful of macadamia nuts. Well, that was 280 calories pre-dinner.
So that takes us from there, so you've identified maybe that it's the afternoon snacking and the high caloric load of that. So it's probably unreasonable. What we look at then is the before and after. So what do we do? If somebody gets injured at a joint, we generally look up and down the chain, correct? Somebody's got a knee injury, like, how is their foot functioning, their hip? When there is a time of day that's calling out that somebody is, we'll call it messing up, but like you're driven to have a pre-dinner snack binge, what I'm going to look at is what's occurring, or what somebody should look at when they're doing this on their own, is what's occurring earlier in the day that's possibly causing, blood sugar to drop off, or this surge of hunger, what's happening earlier in the day, and like what their plan is for the next meal. So let's say somebody earlier in the day was like trying to save up calories and wasn't eating enough. And then, maybe they're having this 4 or 5 o'clock binge. Or, it could even be coming from the other side. Maybe somebody is convinced that you can't eat after 6 p.m. and they're only going to have a lean protein and lettuce for dinner. And they're like, wow, I need to get it in now. So when you're triaging, it's about identifying it. We want to remove, or we want to cut back on this bad behavior that's inhibiting your goal. But we want to look at the things around it that could prevent that behavior from happening, or kind of take the edge off.
Is it really useful to journal like what's going on with you when you're eating certain things?
Very much so. And if you talk about something that I call like a gateway or a trigger food. So there are things that you may notice that you eat. And that's why I think the best thing is just journaling about your food. You might notice that if you have a bowl of sugared cereal in the morning, so we're talking about a high carbohydrate punch, maybe there wasn't much fat in it, maybe you use skim milk, and you are ravenous 2 hours later, and you even crash, low blood sugar, you just want to keep eating all day. It's learning those things about yourself. So I think what's difficult is the listeners to this are probably like, well, just tell me what it is that I'm supposed to eat. Like how much of this, how much of that, what should I eat? What I'm saying, the most important thing is to learn your own body by watching, kind of putting in the time in the process of how does it react to these foods, or how does it react to these macro combos. There is no perfect diet. So there are so many different ways to get to an end. And it's really like what lights the spark for you? What is going to work for you? What is going to work beyond you? What is going to work for the members of your household for you to be on and tolerate you? And there's many different ways to get there, but the best way to get there is to create your own path. And the only two things you need to keep in mind while moving towards, your diet to get results is, are you eating the right quantity of food? And by quantity of food, are you eating too much or too little, or just right to hit your goals? And looking to improve food quality when it talks, because 1,200 calories coming from McDonald's is going to be different than 1,200 calories coming from, Whole Foods cooked at home. So just simplifying that down. And that's why I am not giving you a protein recommendation or telling you what percentage of your diet should come from fats or carbs. Fats and carbs both provide energy. The truth is that percentage can be variable for the person. It could be a variable for the day, and they could both get you where you need to be.
That somehow started sounding really complicated. All of a sudden. It's like after you make the obvious changes, what do you do after that?
So we keep wanting to change things and make it harder. If something is working, you keep doing the same thing. It doesn't have to be super complex. We go into the gym and we add 5 pounds for as long as we can. If we are getting the results, let's say for Matt, because he triaged alcohol, and we may even talk about how sometimes behaviors are linked. I know for Matt, the nutritional behavior and training behavior are very strongly linked. So we can't really talk about diet without also talking about exercise and activity. I know that's the same for me. I'm going to eat a certain way if I have a workout coming later in the day, because I know I don't want to feel a certain way. So oftentimes I'll tell somebody and it changes their behavior alone. Eat as if you are working out in 2 hours. And guess what they don't eat? A big plate of greasy food. There's certain things, if you could tell yourself, eat the way you would eat, if you know that in an hour, you're going in for a lifting session or you're going for a walk. So those are strongly linked together.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's one of the reasons I think that we've continued to encourage at Barbell Logic, we don't offer nutrition coaching only anymore. Nutrition needs to be paired with training. And we still offer training alone, but we're trying to move in a direction that one without the other is broken.
Yep.
Training without any developing any habits or right relationship with food is broken, and dieting without training or exercise is broken, and they're incomplete. And if ultimately what we're trying to do is improve people's quality of life, you have to have both. They don't both have to be perfect. And again, I want to be clear, like, we understand who our demographic is, who our typical client is, who the listener of Barbell Logic is. It's not 27-year-old competitive bodybuilders. It's their moms and dads, they're executives, they're grandmas and grandpas, they're people that have kids and live normal lives, and people that don't want to spend their lives eating chicken breast and broccoli and eating like a bodybuilder. They want to be able to enjoy life, but at the same time, they want to be able to work towards their goal. And I think one of the things that I love about what you do, Gillian, is that you're able to accomplish both. And one of the things I found that I think a lot of people have probably almost everybody that listens to this will resonate, is that for me, you take something like alcohol or something like whatever that food is that maybe takes you down the slippery slope or you have too much of, is that I've noticed that when I start to eat those things or drink those things in moderation, I actually enjoy them way more in moderation. If I have 4 whiskeys a day, I don't really enjoy any of those 1 whiskeys very much. But if I'm like, I'm going to have 1 whiskey a day, right? 1 bourbon, that bourbon's amazing. And I enjoy it that much more. And so, it's like that law of diminishing returns, last night I went to Andy's Frozen Custard. The girl I took there, or 2 nights ago, I went to Andy's Frozen Custard, and I got the little bitty kids cup. And I was like, it's fine. It was like 3 bites. And I was like, it was enough to satisfy me. It was, yep. I got the little sweet taste in my mouth, and it was fine. And so, and I didn't have to tell the girls no. They wanted to go to get ice cream. And I was like, I can go and do this. I don't have to say no and not have any. I can just go get the little quarter cup thing.
Yep.
And it was fine.
We take it for granted so much. Like when we have an excess or something that it's always going to be there. And food is so easily accessible in today's time. And it's right there for us. Think about if you've ever worked for something for your food, if you've ever gone and picked a fruit or picked berries and other stuff and done some amount of work that goes into it, your appreciation for that. Yeah. You've grown your own garden and how you feel about that food versus just pulling stuff off the grocery store shelves. But I do want to get back to Niki, when you mentioned that it becomes so confusing, like, where do you go next? You don't immediately have to go to the next place. It's not about what's next and stuff. It's about being consistent with it. So if you have identified a triage step correctly, and let's use the most common one, which is basically going to be to somehow for, people after New Year's, lots of people want to lose weight. I'm not saying that's the only goal. It's just one of our more common goals is we need a caloric reduction. As long as you have made that happen, you're going to be making progress, and you could continue to learn and tweak from there. But that overall, that is as simple as it has to be. And you could add complexity. What I'm trying to do is simplify it as opposed to make it more complex. So if I simplify this, the point of entry is lower. So the reason a lot of people don't start down the path is it's too complicated, it's too difficult, there's too many differing viewpoints, and people feel like this is right and this is wrong. And it's not about right and wrong, because we could look at many diets, popular diets that work, that exist in complete opposition to each other. So I'm trying to just simplify the starting point. And the starting point is to make a change and to keep up with that change. And once that change becomes habit and part of your life, you could start identifying the next change. So that next change, maybe like the 5 more pounds you add to the bar. But what that brings us to the next step is, so you have identified where you want to make change. You've come to terms with your non-negotiables. You've triaged, and now we need to plan. So this is where here is where we go from thinking steps to action steps. And this is the most complex part of it. So it's not about, again, knowing what to do, it's actually doing it. So now we're in the action step phase. What does planning ahead look like? You want to make this change, and how are you going to go about doing that? And it could be so many different things on all levels. Planning ahead does not mean prepping 21 meals for the week and weighing and measuring and putting that stuff on the food scale and labeling the macros in it. It may mean that for some people, but planning ahead could be as simple as setting an emergency snack pack kit in your car for that time of day that you're going to make the mistake. Planning ahead could be choosing a meal from the restaurant that you're going to have because you usually make a poor decision when you get there. It could be using a food prep delivery service. It's got to fit where you're at.
You've started doing something that I really like, where you have people look at the month coming up and identify which days are going to be days that they know are either going to be high caloric intake or low caloric intake, depending on what their goals are, or there's going to be a challenging day.
Yep.
How does that help?
So the same way we would plan anything, if we're planning a trip, planning a vacation, when we plan ahead, what we want to look at is what are going to be the obstacles to compliance on the change that we want to make. Where are we going to have the toughest points? Regular workday, most of us are fine because we follow a schedule, we eat at normal times, but the days that you know are going to be different. Maybe that's a travel day, maybe you're on a flight, maybe that's a day that you're spending with family and they have completely different ideas about nutrition and eating and food behavior, and is kind of identifying where those points are and planning around them. So if you can't plan for them, there's going to be things that we can't plan for. We're going to go someplace and be served a meal. Sometimes you're at a seat at dinner and you can't control what you can get, but you could balance that out on both sides of it. So the planning ahead is we're going to look at where the obstacles, where are we going to have difficulty? And then we decide, can we do anything about those? Or do we really just do a better job on both ends of those things?
Yeah, it seems like so many difficult food choices, or so many of what we would call the wrong decisions based off of what our goals are at the time, occur in a time where we're like more emotionally sensitive. Like we really want that joy. We're really feeling the dinner that we're at, the social engagement, or we're like bummed out, or we're hungry and we just can't make logical decisions in the moment. So if we can like prepare to take care of ourselves during those challenging times, we'll help ourselves like make better decisions, or even kind of avoid those situations altogether if we need to.
And it's not going to be perfect. You're going to realize that you make the same mistakes with your eating behaviors over and over again. And it's going to take making that mistake, or we call mistakes, several times to realize it. But I want to get people away from thinking about food as good or bad or right or wrong or being on or off plan. You're on a journey. It's a continuum. You're a living, breathing thing. There's no on or off. You are going to eat. You're going to eat several times a day for the rest of your life. So to get people away from seeing a food or a food group or carbs or something else as a bad thing, there are very, very low level consequences for eating an unhealthy food in the moment, right? You are not going to eat one like Big Mac supersized meal and keel over of a heart attack. This is something over time. So I'd like people to stop punishing themselves for the bad decisions and really start to understand where those decisions are coming from instead.
I like that, because if you punish yourself, then you put yourself right back into that emotionally compromised state.
And not to see it as a bad decision, just seeing it as being part of the greater picture. So there's something that I'm working on actually as a strategy with Matt right now, which is essentially a heavy, light, medium of how aggressive he's going to be with his approach. And I've thought a little bit more about it, and I'm actually changing that to a 1, 2, or 3. So let's imagine that on any given day, a 1. So you're going to be a 1, a 2, or a 3 with an approach. A 1 is just kind of maintenance. I'm talking about this with activity. This could be for anything in life. This is activity. This is nutrition. You're just kind of getting by. And we're going to use a metaphor of climbing a mountain for this. So a 1, you're at base camp. You're possibly planning for the next thing. Maybe this is where we're at over the holidays. You're thinking ahead, but you're kind of stationary. You're not doing anything really bad, but you're not doing anything to progress yourself towards your goals. So then we have a 2. 2 is we're trying, and 2 is where we're trying to exist most of the time, where we're making these changes. So we're going not fairly hard at it. 2 is kind of, you make really great choices throughout the day, and maybe you have a couple of drinks and a small dessert at night, or 3 of your 4 meals were what you planned. And then this is where, if we're trying to make progress, we should spend most of our time. And then you have some days or periods of time that are a 3. So let's imagine 2, if we're using our mountain metaphor, as we're kind of going through these winding switchbacks where there's pretty views and we're picking flowers, but we're still going up. 3, full send, like steep climb up that mountain. That's the day that you went all in. That's the day that you followed your intentions 100%. So if we take a look and we don't want to weigh and measure and do all these fancy things, if we just added up the sum of those numbers throughout the week, you're basically, the speed of your results are going to be, I mean, pretty, why can't I find words? They're going to correlate to that sum. So if you've got this sum of like 21 for the week, you're going to see some pretty big changes, but you can't maintain that. And if you're all ones, a sum of 7 for the week, you're probably not going as fast in the direction that you want to be going with. So that's another way to look at it, rather than being on or off. So rather than saying, I ate poorly, or, that was disgusting that I did this, or you had a day that was a 1. And it's a way to look at it and take out kind of the emotions that we tie and all of the negative thoughts that we have about our food behavior, activity, how we feel about ourselves, and just step back and say, hey, I hit an 18 out of a possible this for the week. Or you know what? This week I didn't work that hard. It's a 7. And we remove a little bit of that. So that's actually a strategy I'm trying with some clients right now.
We can't wait to hear how that goes. That's awesome. I like that.
Yeah, it's going well, especially when you've got I think it works really well when you've got a goal, like even a relatively short-term goal to work for, or something that's, say, 6 weeks out or something. Then you can start saying, hey, the goal is to live in the 2s, but it's to ramp up the 3s as we get closer and closer to that thing. Knowing that like 3s are not long-term sustainable, 2 is what's long-term sustainable.
Right.
But we're going to go on vacation here in a couple weeks, and so it's like, and we're going down to Mexico, where it's January and it's freezing cold, and I'm going to go down there and it's going to be warm and nice, and we run around in swimsuits. And like, I really want to have my nutrition together. And so it's a good plan to get us there. And there's additional motivation to have those 3 days. 3 days are hard, really hard for me when there isn't a thing that I'm trying to achieve. Yep. And it comes back to the very first thing you talked about.
And you don't need them if there's not.
Those goals is, if the goal's not, I'm like, I don't know, if the goal is just to kind of exist and keep doing the thing, then I'm never going to have a 3-day. But if it's like, hey, I'm going to Cancun in 3 weeks.
It allows you to personalize what those days mean. So we're talking about this 1, 2, and 3 day. Now imagine, taking an exercise and writing that down. What does a 1, 2, and 3 day mean to you? And they're going to mean different things at different times based on what your goals are. So that allows you to say a day for a 3 means this for me. And then think even beyond what that means nutritionally. What does that mean in terms of your training and activity? What does that mean in terms of, I do it with everything now. I'm like, in terms of work, and I'll look at a few things, whether it's, did I do the right things about sleep or stress? And I kind of could look at everything. Like some days are just going to be 1s and 2s. And a 3 day for somebody that's not aggressively chasing a goal. And so here's something interesting that happens with New Year's and New Year's resolutions fail, is that we have this artificial day, one calendar date changes and it's the new year. And we believe we should suddenly be doing all these things differently. And many of us came from what may have been the laziest time of year, where we may have been the least productive at work and the least driven to food prep and other stuff, and thinks that things should be just completely different on January 1st. Yet for some reason, lack the drive and motivation to do so, and then struggle with that concept. It's like, oh, I should be doing these things. It's the new year, but it's not there. You still want to sit on the couch, or you're still not driven to get up early, and realize that, like, I mean, for most of us, it's the coldest time of year. It's the darkest time of year. And it's just an artificial motivator. So January 1st, when people think, hey, I should be at a 3, or want to hit the ground running, like, I want to be at a 3. I know when I'm counseling my clients that being at a 3 January 1st is probably not achievable. Because, like, what are the consequences? Come the end of January, how many of us are in a bathing suit on the beach at the end of January? Not many. So having the ability to make progress, but not always that, like, just small steps. Maybe you're at a 2 and not a 3.
January 1's in the past, right? When it's January 18th, you set this goal based on this day that passed instantly. And by the way, almost nobody starts their diet on January 1, right? They start on the first Monday or whatever after January 1. Well, now you're already setting this goal and trying to do this practical thing for a goal that actually sat back in the past. question is like, what's coming March 1st? And if the answer is nothing, then I think, at least for me, it's very difficult to pursue, especially to pursue those 3 days, those days that are threes, because, May and June and swimsuit weather and sunshine, that's a long time. Not all of us live in Orange County, Nikki Zims. Okay. They're not all nice days.
Good.
So,
Although, please don't. We have enough people here.
Jillian's in Vermont. Oh, don't worry. Nobody's moving to California, Nikki. I don't know if you've heard.
That's why short-term motivators are so important. Like, just to say, I'm going to be healthier. Like, what does that mean? What are the little motivators? What do we grab onto? I do that with Matt often. Like, hey, what's coming up? What can we grab onto? And a lot of us rely on some level of an external motivation, like, because a date alone, January 1st alone, is absolutely meaningless.
Yeah.
But if you're going on vacation, that has meaning to you.
Yeah. Yeah, if we do like a video shoot, or I'm going to speak publicly, or like, okay, there's a thing to work towards, right? So yeah, those are great. And those little wins and those things you come back to, it comes back to, we talked about this last week, where we introduced that idea of minimum effective dose programming, of not trying to do everything at once, right? Of one thing at a time. You come back to those same ideas, right? You look at, so to kind of review what you had said, is like, we're going to look at our nutrition as a whole. We're going to take pictures and get a good idea of what exactly, a very clear idea, a transparent idea of what we're eating. And then we're going to triage. And that triage is like, what's the thing the smallest thing we can change for the greatest return on investment? And you don't have to do a triage the next step the next day. It's like, if it's working, it's 2 weeks, it's 3 weeks, it's 4 weeks, it's 6 weeks. And I've no longer had 5 alcoholic drinks in a day. I'm averaging 1 drink or a drink and a half or something like that a day. And we start to plateau. Then you go, okay, like, what's the next little win? What's the next little triage? What's the next thing we do? And so then those little wins continue. They're so much easier to pursue and get excited about and keep you motivated, right? In the same way we talked about getting started with the fitness stuff, you start with this discipline. Nutrition's often the same thing. You kind of have to make this discipline start. But my experience is that the motivation will follow after a short period of time, after 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Nobody really wants to eat healthy on day one. And even if you think you do, you don't really, especially if you come out of eating holiday food. But then you start to make those changes, and pretty quick, the motivation comes.
But finding things that are meaningful to track. So we often think to track weight and waist measurement. And those don't always correlate to the work we put in. And that's where things get difficult. So if we are talking about, you've done everything right and the scale doesn't move. So it's about finding, when we're measuring and celebrating our results, is about finding things, a way to measure that has meaning for us. For some of us, that is the notch on our belt, on our weightlifting belt. And it could be anything. Somebody, it may be comparing their visual foods on week 2 to what it looked like on week 1 when they first started, or they established a better habit. Maybe they're making dinner and chopping vegetables at night with their kids in the kitchen. So you want to establish as many things as possible as measures for you. So I'm going to give you an example. This one's a little bit personal. Like 2 weeks ago, my husband, Scott, said to me, "When's the last time you got on a scale?" And I almost cried. Just asking that question was upsetting to me, because my interpretation was, oh, what, I'm fat? Like, did I let myself go? I live in Vermont. Nobody sees me. I wear thick layers of clothes. And he's talking about that kind of basically just as a measure. Like, it's important to him. He's in the military, so he always has to weigh in. For me, the scale is kind of a negative association. There's a number that I see, and my self-worth ends up getting wrapped up. If I see a certain number, it's upsetting to me. So we've made some changes, and we found ways to quantify, because it's a few weeks before you really start noticing really good physical changes. Sometimes it's a few weeks, but what keeps you motivated? So I looked at a few things, one of them being PMS symptoms and stuff. And I noticed with making the changes that I was less symptomatic. And another one of them is I've been having a little bit of like joint and hand pain, possibly a little bit of inflammation related, I don't know, carpal tunnel, something. And I noticed that just with the changes, I have reduction in the inflammation and pain, and I feel physically better when I wake up in the morning. So I've looked to track other things in addition to aesthetics and numbers on a scale as ways to keep me motivated. Because again, the scale is not always cooperative. With women, it's frequently not cooperative. If you change your training program, that's going to change. Sleep patterns, that's going to change. So I encourage everybody to find ways of measuring that are completely different. Something that's important to them, something that they notice. Because if you make positive changes to your nutrition, to your activity plan, you are going to feel better doing other things and take notice of that.
I've found, and this goes back to something we talked about when you're first getting started, is figure out what your goals are. Like, I think every day you get better and better at understanding what you want on a grand scheme, like what you want out of life, what you want out of your relationships, what you want out of your training. It's a huge thing to actually come to terms with what you actually want and know what that means. And when you start answering that question when it comes to how you want to feel and how you want to eat, you can really kind of describe that person, and you can describe how you want to feel and how you want to think about yourself and other things that are probably going to be influenced by the eating changes that you make. So I think that when you really give yourself time to think about what you want, you'll start to see more ways to measure how you're doing. Be like, I want to feel this way, and I want to be confident in these choices that I'm going to be making. I don't want to feel guilty anymore. And it becomes so much more than just like the number that you get to see on the scale. So like, I think spend a lot of time letting yourself really think and dig into finding out what you really want. Can learn a lot.
By the way, I think that we should be able to take pride in that stuff. I don't think that we should be arrogant, but man, how many people do we interact with every single day who never think about that stuff? Who do think like, I hate the way I look or whatever, but they never really think about like, well, what does the perfect day look like? What does the perfect day of eating look like, or training, or like feeling the best I possibly can? Like there's something that occurs that I think that we should have some pride in, that we actually care enough to think about, to pursue that. What do right relationships in my life look like? What is a right relationship with food or training or sleep or all those sort of things? I think that's something that so many people live their entire life and never really even consider.
Well, I think it takes you from living how you think you should live, which you'll probably never succeed at, because, you know, if you should yourself into situations, like it's never really where you want to be.
Yep.
And it takes you into a situation where like, this is where I want to be. And that keeps you in a mindset where you feel like you have a lot more control.
Yeah, that's good. So we have talked about, I'm going to kind of wrap up a little bit here and kind of put a capstone on it. So Gillian, you've talked about getting a really good idea of what you're eating, a true idea of what you're eating with like a visual food diary, taking pictures of what you're eating, identifying your non-negotiables. These are the things that I don't want to give up. These are things that are important to me. Triaging the things that are your major roadblocks to getting to your goals. And for some of us, that's maybe a losing weight goal. For some of us, a putting on mass or putting on muscle goal or whatever that is. Learning how to plan ahead, especially not just for today, but looking at the calendar, the month, the weeks that are coming up, and identifying those days that are going to be those days that are not going to be perfect, and kind of figuring out how to plan ahead around those. Not pursuing big goals in the moment, but focusing on small wins, small changes, small wins to keep us motivated over the course of time and being sustainable, having that long-term sustainability. Celebrating PRs. We talk about this in training all the time. Like we love PRs. A personal record is huge in training and strength and hitting squat PRs and lifting PRs and chin up PRs, but they're equally as important in nutrition and daily habits. And again, you identify it. That doesn't just mean PRs for the number on the scale or the waist measurement, but like identifying some of those other PRs that aren't so you're not so emotionally tied to, but that still mean a tremendous amount to you. And then your last one really is keeping a positive mindset. So on those, when you have those days that maybe it's not even a 1, let's be honest, maybe it's a 0, right?
It's a -3.
You stumble and there's an avalanche and you fall down the mountain a little. Yes.
How do you not derail long? Because a lot of people, almost all of us, will derail for a meal or a day. And we talked about this 2 weeks ago, Niki and I did, but how do we keep a meal of derailment turning into momentum of experiencing weakness, of just a completely changing everything? And I struggled with this when I went on my trip to Scotland and England, because it was like delicious food and there was nowhere to train and it was weird times. And so how do we keep that positive mindset, not derail?
I think I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's a single step at a time. So it is with the derailment, not letting a derailment snowball from a day to a week to a month to I'll start on January 1st, is truly recognizing that every time you sit down to eat, every time you go out into the gym and do a workout, every time you leave your house and do a walk, you've been blessed with another opportunity. So to see the positive way that, you know what, for breakfast, I had 2 powdered donuts, but guess what? In 3 hours, I'm going to get to eat again, and I'm going to get to do something positive for myself. So my husband has a term that he calls having like nutritional amnesia. Like it's just behind you, forget about it, put it in the past. It's helpful in some ways. We can't forget about it because everything counts, but there's no guilt that should come from that. Again, low-level consequences for making what you consider to be a poor choice. A couple hours later, you have another opportunity, and you'll keep getting other opportunities. You'll keep getting chances to write your course.
It's good. When I have the way this looks like for me is when I have a 1 day or a 0 day, the goal is not the next day is not to be a 3, it's to be a 2. I think one of the things we do when we overeat at a Thanksgiving dinner is we decide to intermittent fast the next day. Well, I'm not going to eat till dinner the next day. It's like the worst thing I could do. It's to have a normal day next, because if I don't have a normal day next, that just leads to more feelings of like failed again, screwed it up.
So there should never be punishment. If we look at it that way, one of the first things I tell people, especially coming off something, is be kind to yourself. Be as kind to yourself as you could possibly be every day at every meal. And if you went off the hook on Thanksgiving, the next day you don't starve all day. And we know, we could see cycles of what happens from that, but we should not punish ourselves. So like, what do we don't want to do? We don't want to miss training for 2 weeks and then go in and do a monster session where we have DOMs for a week. So same thing goes with nutrition. You were consuming 4,000 calories a day for Christmas week. You don't want to have a 1,200 calorie day. We just find a 2,500.
Yeah, that's good. Awesome. Anything else?
Awesome.
That's a great.
Not for me. I talked too much already.
That's why you're here. I don't know if anybody told you, but you're here on a podcast to talk about nutrition.
I don't know. I know that we are wrapping up, but I don't want to leave people feeling directionless with what the important things are in terms of food. We had an entire nutrition podcast without really going into detail about, carbs, proteins, fats, quantities, all of that other stuff. So I imagine that is something that will come up in the future. But what I wanted really to get accomplished today was to wrap your mind around it being one step at a time, it's small changes, and to trust your common sense. So again, if you feel like today may not have been enough information directing you about, how many grams of protein should I eat, or how many grams of fiber, or how do I balance a meal, I encourage everybody to start by doing a food diary, ideally visually with pictures, for 5 days in time, and recognizing that it is painfully obvious the changes that you need to make.
It's awesome. So a great place, one of the things we want to do is give you those, what's the takeaway, right? And if you're like, what's next for me? I've internalized some of this. One of the things we want to do is that we always want to provide good, valuable, free resources for you. Listen, we would love for you to join Barbell Logic, and we've got an incredible nutrition team that can help you. Go to Barbell Logic. You can become an online coaching client. Your first month's free. Nutrition's free. The first month, you can cancel anytime. But you don't have to do that, right? So you also have, you can go to barbelllogic.com or barbelllogic.com/podcast. Both will get you there. You can follow the Take Charge 10 Nutrition Challenge. I did this last year, and it really started me on the right track. It was little tiny steps every day for 10 days. I did it with my whole family. There's super healthy steps. There's stuff you can do with your wife, your kids, your neighbors, your friends. It's super healthy. So it's nothing as, there's nothing you would read on there and be like, kids probably shouldn't do that. It's like just general wonderful steps that get you started in the right direction. Like the first day is like, drink more water. Like who shouldn't drink more water? Well, I should, our kids should, your dog should. So that's a great place to start, is the Take Charge 10 Challenge. And then we've got a nutrition ebook on the website as well that really lays out these primary 7 steps to success that Gillian's put together along with our editor-in-chief, Nick Solin. That's excellent. So those are both two wonderful high-value proposition things that you can get for free. It doesn't cost anything, or not. It's not a big CTA at the end, like, hey, you should spend money with us. We'd always love to have you as a client at Barbell Logic, but we're going to continue to provide really good information there. You could also see more nutrition content. Gillian and Niki have done a ton of great podcasts in the past about this. You want a little deeper dive and go beyond just the getting started piece. You can go, again, right to the website, go to that nutrition landing page. It's super easy to find from the homepage. And there will be some of our best nutrition content there as well. It's easy to find, and it's already been curated for you. So lots of stuff that you can go to and read.
In our newsletter every week, which you can sign up for on the website, Gillian always has a tip of the week, which is, they're always very actionable, very useful.
The Friday 5 newsletter that we've put out now for a few years has been wonderful because we're able to really take the best of the week and put it out. It's we get information overload a lot of times, lots of pieces of content and stuff that we put out for coaches or students and clients and nutrition and training. And it's like, okay, what's the best of the best? Nutrition or the newsletter is where you want to go, the Friday 5. Sign up and you just get, we're not going to hammer your email inbox. You get one on Friday midday, and it helps you kick off a great weekend. So all good places to start. So Gillian, thanks for being on the show. She'll be on again. She is both of our nutrition coaches. She's done a great job. And I don't think Niki and I, we probably couldn't be hardly any different as clients, as far as nutrition clients.
Are we different, Gillian?
They're totally different. Niki's like Mr. Consistency, and Matt has no, I'm never between a 2 and a 9. I'm a 1 or a 10, baby. I'm all in or all out. So I'm exactly the opposite of what Gillian said to me. She's like, it's okay to just like one step at a time. I'm like, I'm 100% in, or I am in a gutter about to die. It's a joke. So I've been trying to make good habits in the new year. I feel good about things. And it's been nice because I've been a tough client for Gillian, and she's had to learn how to deal with the psychiatry. You said, it's like the science of compliance is what it is for, right? Like, man, if she can get Matt Reynolds compliant, she can get anybody compliant. That's the deal. So I'm just trying to help make you a better coach, Gillian.
No, it has been all about, so I have been in this position now for, I want to say a little bit over 2 years, and the evolution of it. And it has really come full circle from recognizing that it's one thing. There is an art and science to dietary recommendations and giving somebody like their macros for the day and ratcheting calories and proportions of macronutrients. But at the end of the day, it's not about that. It's not about the specifics of the science. It is about, how do we get compliance? How do we get people to go and actually do it? How do we get people, reporting is so inconsistent and incorrect. And kind of the evolution of our nutrition program is really skills, habits, strategies, and ways to be compliant with your plan.
That's good. Awesome. All good?
But I am the best client, right? Just kidding.
Better than me.
I know Matt's brother is. It's fine.
I might have 2 new best clients.
My brother's like me. My brother is a robot and 100% in or 100% out as well. So
you're never going to believe who the best clients right now are actually Niki Berman and Nick Solin.
There you go.
But I totally believe that, actually.
2 more members
that
of our
makes
leadership.
total
I can
sense.
definitely see that for sure. Thanks again for listening to Barbell Logic Podcast. As always, we would love a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere where you listen to your podcast. It actually really helps. It lets more people who aren't aware of us and Barbell Logic hear this message. Again, we've tried to make this so it's relatively easy for people to understand, and it sort of cuts through all the crazy junk in the fitness world and the nutrition world. And so trying to brings just some basic logic and wisdom to you every single week. So we will love a 5-star review, and we'll see you next week. We'll continue with our talking about like how to get started and how to move forward, programming, lots of fun stuff coming here in the new year, rest of January and February. So we'll see you next week.
See you next time.